Howdy, guys. Welcome back. I'm excited to talk to you guys about the what we're calling the frame of creation. Recently we had a conversation about different theories of creation and the different ways that people make sense of how creation happened in the real world. Today we're not doing that. I actually don't find those kind of conversations helpful in our class, and I also don't find them to be where the most interesting questions are, where the most interesting content is in this creation story. What I find here is something far more beautiful than simply asking how long did creation take. Rather, what are we learning about God and what He is like from this story? So it's with that in mind that we will jump into our conversation. So I want to start with this basic idea of the rhythm of creation. We see a rhythm happening, regular rhythm of creation happening throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. Creation looks like certain steps over and over again, and not just at the beginning. So check this out. The rhythm of creation looks something like this. It starts with chaos, and then there is creation. Then there will be some kind of decreation where that creation is like broken down. There will be some kind of deliverance from that decreation, and then creation will be made new again. And it goes in this loop, right? For those of you watching this, think about we have chaos at the beginning. God creates the world. Then the flood happens and it destroys the world. Noah is delivered and creation happens again. That rhythm is going to be happening over and over and over again in the Old Testament. Well, in this lecture, we're going to mainly be talking about these first two, about this idea of chaos and this idea of creation. Why? What are these two ideas and what are they doing in our story? So let's jump into that. So we see this story, the opening lines of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Well, according to the author, what was the world like before? Before creation happens, what was it like? And for the author, the answer is it was formless and void. The Hebrew word tohu vavohu, something more like wild and waste or useless. It was really playing on this image of chaos. In the ancient world, even outside the Bible, the ancients considered water, the oceans, the seas, to be chaos incarnate, chaos itself. And I mean, imagine you go to the ocean, and what do you see in the ocean? These giant monsters yeeting themselves out of the water and landing. Anybody who gets on boats, waves the size of mountains are crushing them, right? It's chaos on the waters. And so at the beginning of Genesis 1, we see this story where there is the Holy Spirit is hovering over these chaos waters. It is formless. It is chaotic. It is just, just kind of this primordial goo that exists, this chaotic water that's happening at the beginning. And the Spirit of God is going to break into that chaos and make something. Where there once was chaos, we're going to see God create things out of it. And we're going to see that chaos return. I mean, think about it's all water at the beginning. God creates something. Think about what happens at the flood. God created, or it was chaos. God created. And then how does He end the world? It goes right back to chaos. It goes back to that primordial water, that chaos water, right? So this image of chaos and sea and water coming together is really important as we discuss some of these themes in the Old Testament. So let's talk about the framework. This framework, I think, is just one of my favorite things to teach about ever, and I hope that you also enjoy. So let's consider the days of creation. There are 6 days where things are being made, right? Number 1, we have light and we have dark. Number 2, we have the water is separated. And on day 3, we have that the earth and the water are separated. So 3 acts of separation. Light and dark separated from each other, the waters separated from each other, and the earth and the waters separated from each other. And we end up with something that looks like a dome. We'll talk about this a little more in detail, especially as we move toward Noah. But the ancient Israelites considered the world to kind of be on this disc with a glass dome over it. I think about it, you're in a somewhat arid society. You look up at the sky, and what color is the sky? Well, it's blue. What happens sometimes from the sky? Water falls out of it. Oh, I bet that's water up there. There must be some kind of glass dome holding back water. You dig far enough down into the ground. What are you going to find? You're going to find water, right? And so the ancients kind of saw themselves as being in this big dome that had water all around it. Because in day 2, right, the waters are separated. And you kind of get this pocket in the middle where God's going to start putting stuff. And so then on day 3, another act of separation, the water is separated from the land and you actually have land. Well, on day 4, what is made? We get the sun and we get the moon and the stars. On day 5, we get the animals that live in the sky, get these birds, and we get these animals that live in the water. We get these fish. And on day 6, what do we get but animals that live on the land that was created? You may be starting to see what's going on here. We see a pretty important connection. What is this connection? On days 1 through 3, God is making houses. And on days 4 through 6, God is making the things that live in those houses, right? Each day corresponds to another day in the second half of creation. On day 1, God makes light and he makes dark. And then on day 4, he makes the sun. It's going to live in the light, and we're going to make the moon and stars, and they live in the dark. On day 2, he makes the up water and the down water, right? The sky and the sea. What does he make on day 5? Well, shoot, he makes the stuff that lives in the sky and in the sea. On day 3, he makes land. What does he make on day 6? Well, it's the stuff that lives in the house that he made, right? God is ordering the world perfectly. He is making home for his creation, and then he is making the creation that will live in those homes that he's made for it, always providing the things that they need. Notice this. Out of chaos, out of these primordial chaos waters, God is making life and God is making order. Where the world was chaotic, God is perfectly ordering the world so that every little thing has a home it can live in. Everything has its place, and every place has a spot, right? It has a thing to go in it. Everything is ordered perfectly. What was once this primordial chaos water is now perfect. It is ordered, and that only happened because God intervened and broke into the chaos and made order out of it. Genesis 1 is showing us what God is like. He is a God who brings order out of chaos. He brings life out of chaos. And for everything that he has created, he has made it so that it can live perfectly, so that it can have all the things that it needs and be at home. So now I want to talk about Genesis 1 as it pertains to the rest of the Pentateuch. Right? When we talk about the Pentateuch, first 5 books of the Bible, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These first 5 books are made to be read together, right? Think of them more like 5 chapters of the same book. You need to read these things together. And Genesis 1 plays a really important role in the beginning of us reading these first 5 chapters, reading this first 5 books of the Bible. And that's what I want to talk about here. In the Pentateuch, there are 3 main goals. The first 5 books of the Bible are trying to give us 3 broad themes for the reader who's going to be reading it later. The first obvious theme, who is this God? This Yahweh guy has been messing with us for a long time. He keeps talking to us, doing stuff with us. Who is he? Secondly, what is he doing? What has he been doing in the life of the world and in the life of the Israelites? For us, what is he doing in the world? And number 3, and arguably the most tricky, why does he like us? For some reason, this God is obsessed with humanity and he's obsessed with the Israelites, with Abraham's kids. What is going on about that? The whole Pentateuch, all 5 books, are basically trying to answer those 3 questions. Who is this God? What is he doing? And why does he like us so much? So I want to talk about how Genesis 1 actually helps us with answering these questions. It's setting us up for what the Pentateuch is trying to do. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how other stories of creation in the ancient world, how their gods viewed creation and how that went down. So one of the first things you'll notice if you read other creation stories, these other gods are very concerned with themselves. They primarily concern about me and all of my needs, right? Humans are usually made to be some kind of slave. The gods actually need these humans in order to make sacrifices so that the gods can eat, right? But they don't actually care about the humans. They just need them like personal chefs. I just need somebody to feed me, right? These gods are mainly concerned with themselves. And really, creation, it's often an accident. It's often done because of some great war. It's never really done willingly. It's done because it kind of has to. And they feel kind of ambivalent to creation. It's here, it's not the best, it's whatever. So for the ancient person reading Genesis 1, something's going to seem really strange out the gate. Number one, we find that God is perfectly ordering the world. The world isn't the result of some kind of war or some just kind of explosion that makes this thing kind of loose and gross. The world is ordered, and it works really well. Number two, humanity serves a much more important role. Humanity isn't just slaves for the God. They're actually made as co-regents. They are kings and queens of the world. They're made in the image of God, meaning they bear his authority and actually work not so much for him, but with him in creation, doing his will in creation. They're not just chefs anymore. They actually have some kind of authority. And at the end of the day, creation is said to be very, very good. This God really likes the creation that he's made. It wasn't an accident. It was important. It was very important to him. Genesis 1 is beginning to answer the question, who is this God? He's not like the other gods. He's not like the gods the Babylonians follow. He's not like the gods the Hittites follow. This God is obsessed with us. He really likes creation, and he has ordered it perfectly. Genesis 1 is setting us up for what the Pentateuch is going to be doing. Check this out. Genesis 1 introduces God. It serves almost like a preface to a story. If you want to read Genesis 2 through Deuteronomy as like this grand story, Genesis 1 is the preface. It is setting you up for what's about to happen in this story. Genesis 1 tells us, what is God like? This God you're about to read this story about, what is he like? Can he be trusted? Right? This God, the gods of the ancient world that people are worshiping, they're all tricky. They all kind of don't really care about people. But Genesis 1 tells us that this God is thoroughly thinking through how creation should work, making sure that everything has a home, making sure everything has what it needs. Genesis 1 answers the question, does God care about life? Is he a God who's just kind of using humans? Is he a God that just sees creation as something that happened? No. In Genesis 1, God is meticulously crafting all things, making sure that they have what they need. And when he creates life, he says, this is beautiful and wonderful and good. Genesis 1 tells us, hey, you're about to read a story about God. This God's going to do a lot of stuff. He's going to do beautiful things. He's going to do scary things. He's going to deliver people and he's going to kill people. Before we jump into that story, let me tell you what he's like. Let me introduce you so that when you get to the story of God and the Amalekites, you're not going to freak out thinking this God is just some vengeful, crazy guy. No, he's a God who makes good things and cares about people. So once God's been introduced, Genesis 2 starts our story. We talked about in a previous video that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, there are some discrepancies, right? In Genesis 1, plants are being made before people, but in Genesis 2, people made before plants. What's going on there? And I don't really know. A lot of that is confusing, and it's just going to be confusing. But what we see is that if Genesis 1 is this introduction to the whole Pentateuch, here is this God and what he's like in this story, Genesis 2 begins the story. Suddenly we come down from this grand level of looking at the cosmos, and we see God making humans like a craftsman. He is working with his hands and fashioning humanity. He's breathing into them. We pick up the story of God as one who is intimately tied to humanity, entering into their life. We're seeing the first people. We're seeing the story begin with who were Adam and Eve and what were they doing? What was their life like? And arguably, even more importantly, what the heck happened? Man, things were great and now they're not. How did that take place? The story of the Pentateuch and the rest of the Bible is the story of God's interactions with humanity. And Genesis 2 begins that story. But Genesis 1 is introducing us to the God who's going to be at work in Genesis 2. Where Genesis 2 begins the story, Genesis 1 is the preface to the whole entirety of the book. And it's with this in mind that suddenly we can start making some more informed, having more informed discussions about what the goal is of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. How do we use Genesis 1 to discuss creation and how long things took? How do we see these discrepancies in the stories between Genesis 1 and 2? Well, that's tricky and that's hard, but knowing that their goals seem to be in tandem, that Genesis 1 is showing us what God is like and Genesis 2 is bringing us into the beginning of the story, can help us in that discussion. So I hope this was helpful. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I would love to be able to answer any questions you have. And as always, please have conversations about this stuff with your kids. This is some of the most fascinating content to your students outside of Revelation is creation. So please engage your students, talk with them, tell them things you agree with, don't agree with, etc. It's going to be some beautiful conversation. Thanks, guys.